and across the world, a deep sense of gratitude for the more than 70 years in which my mother, as Queen, served the people of so many nations.
The royal family is in shock after Edward's lawyers confirmed a powerful truth that changes everything. For years, Charles believed certain rights and ownership were firmly in his hands, but now clear legal documents have revealed that Edward is the true heir to what was long assumed to belong elsewhere. This discovery has quietly shaken royal expectations and raised serious questions about the past. How did this shift stay hidden for so long? What does this mean for the future of the monarchy? Join us as we uncover the truth behind this surprising royal revelation and what happens next. Quiet inheritance and a growing conflict. On March 25, 2026, a team of senior property lawyers entered the Crown Estate offices and placed a detailed legal file on the table. Inside that file was the full record of everything Prince Edward had carefully built over the years. It contained signed agreements, records of private payments, and clear evidence showing what had been given to him and what could not legally be taken away. This was not something prepared in a rush. It had been put together slowly, step by step, over many years, with one purpose in mind. It was designed for this exact moment. At the center of this situation was a question that quickly began to affect the royal family in a deep way. How did the youngest son come to hold something that the king believed could be taken back? To understand this, it is important to return to the final decisions made by Queen Elizabeth II before her passing in September 2022. She acted with clear intent. She had seen how the family had changed over time. She had observed the growing pressure around money, titles, and control within the institution. Because of this, she made her wishes known while she still had the chance. The title of Duke of Edinburgh was never meant to be uncertain. She had already decided that it would pass to Prince Edward. This decision was not made lightly. The title had defined Prince Philip for more than 70 years. It was closely tied to his life and his role. Queen Elizabeth ensured that it would go to the son who had remained steady, avoided controversy, and never caused harm to the monarchy. This promise was fulfilled in April 2023, when King Charles III officially granted Edward the title. However, the title was only one part of what Edward received. The second part was Bagshot Park. This estate was far more than just a residence. It was the official seat of the dukedom. It is a large Tudor Gothic mansion with 120 rooms, set on 51 acres within Windsor Great Park. In her final years, Queen Elizabeth signed a letter of intent that directly connected Bagshot Park to the Duke of Edinburgh title. This document was witnessed by Prince Philip during his final days. He understood the importance of this decision. Without that connection, the title could lose its foundation. By linking the estate and the title together, Queen Elizabeth made sure they would remain united. This was her clear and final decision. After her passing, a different approach began to take shape within the palace. King Charles had long held a strong belief about his role. He believed that as king, he had the authority to make final decisions about royal property, titles, and everything connected to them. He saw modernization as a reason to review existing arrangements, reduce costs, and reshape how the royal system functioned. This belief gradually moved from thought into action. By the year 2026, this approach had become more visible. Reviews of royal leases were carried out, financial audits were introduced. Quiet pressure was applied behind closed doors to change how members of the family managed their lives and responsibilities. During this period, Bagshot Park became a focus. This shift created a difficult situation. Edward had only received the dukedom in 2023, after waiting for many years. He had seen his father carry the title for decades before finally stepping into that role himself. Yet, within just 3 years, the same institution that granted him the title began actions that could remove the home connected to it. A costly commitment and a growing royal tension. In 1996, when the army chaplain left the building, it was already in poor condition. The structure was worn out, outdated, and had been ignored for many years. At that time, the Crown Estate did not see it as a valuable royal residence. In fact, there were serious discussions about turning it into a hotel or a conference center. This showed clearly how little importance was placed on the property during that period. Instead of redeveloping it, the property was given to Edward under a lease agreement signed in March 1998. The terms of this lease were very clear. He would pay £5,000 each year for 50 years. However, this low rent came with a major responsibility. He was required to restore and repair the entire property immediately. This was not a task that could be delayed or done gradually over time. Edward took on this responsibility fully. He invested £1.36 million of his own private money into the restoration. This was money he had earned himself before becoming a full-time working royal. The total cost of the repairs reached £2.98 million. While the Crown Estate covered part of this cost, Edward still carried a significant financial burden on his own. After the restoration work was completed, his rent was increased to £90,000 per year. This new amount was confirmed by the National Audit Office as the proper market rate. This situation created a clear contrast within the royal family. His brother Andrew lived at Royal Lodge for many years without paying the full market rate. This difference was officially recorded by the National Audit Office. One brother followed the financial rules and met his obligations. The other did not. Edward's actions showed careful planning and long-term thinking. In 2007, he paid £5 million through his company, Eclipse Nominees Limited, to extend the lease from 50 years to 150 years. This decision secured his position for the future. His agreement also gave him the right to sell the lease and keep any profit. This allowed him to build both financial security and control over the property. By the year 2026, the value of the property had increased greatly. It was now estimated to be worth around £30 million. If the Crown Estate were to take it back, it could be sold or leased again for a very large profit. As pressure began to build on Edward to give up the property, it became clear that the situation was not only about modernization. The strong financial value of the estate was an important factor. At this point, Philip's role becomes very important. He had spent more than 70 years observing how the monarchy worked, especially behind closed doors. He understood how decisions could be made quietly and effectively within the institution. Because of this, he took steps to protect his youngest son. Before his death, Philip ensured that a letter of intent was properly witnessed and recorded. This document was designed to provide Edward with protection. Without it, Edward would have been in a much weaker position when pressure began to rise. Philip acted with clear purpose to secure his son's future. By March 25, 2026, Edward was prepared. A legal file delivered that morning was built on 3 strong points. First, the original lease showed his financial investment in the property. Second, the letter signed by Elizabeth and witnessed by Philip linked the estate to Edward for his lifetime. Third, 20 years of records proved that he had maintained the property at a level that saved money for the monarchy. The audit that became a serious dispute. That decision did not remain inside Buckingham Palace. It moved quickly and reached far beyond land or titles. It focused on something deeply personal. Earlier in 2026, before any lawyers arrived with a legal file, a palace official came with a clipboard and a calm instruction. The visit came from the office of Queen Camilla. It was presented as a jewelry audit, described as a routine review, and a national heritage check. That was the official explanation, but the meaning behind it was clear. The visit was meant to count and review jewelry that Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, had worn as her own for 25 years. At the center of this review was one important piece, the Anthem tiara. This was not just another item kept in storage. It was created especially for Sophie's wedding in 1999. It was commissioned by Queen Elizabeth II and designed using 4 antique elements in a honeysuckle pattern, taken from the private collection of Queen Victoria. For many years, this tiara held special meaning. For nearly 2 decades, it was the only tiara Sophie ever wore. This detail is important. Unlike other senior royals, Sophie was not given open access to the grand state tiaras. This was understood within the royal family, even if it was never openly discussed. Her position remained more limited, and the Anthem tiara became her one personal piece. Removing it would leave her without that symbol. The argument from Camilla's office was written in legal terms, but the message was firm. Because the tiara included gold and stones from the time of Queen Victoria, it could be considered crown property. This meant it should be kept in the central royal vault and only used with official approval. The result of this claim was clear. Sophie would no longer fully own the tiara from her wedding day. She would need permission to wear it. This raised a serious concern. If this reasoning were accepted, it would not stop with one tiara. It could allow many personal gifts given by Queen Elizabeth during her 70-year reign to be taken back and reclassified. This would affect not only Sophie, but many members of the royal family. It could even apply to Camilla herself, as parts of her own jewelry collection also come from royal sources. Edward's legal team quickly recognized this risk. At the same time, the situation reminded the public of a past event. After the death of Princess Diana, a diamond and emerald necklace given to her by the Queen Mother on her wedding day in 1981 was returned to the royal vault. Later, it was taken out, redesigned into a brooch, and worn publicly by Camilla. This caused strong public reaction and was not forgotten. Now, a similar situation appeared to be happening again. A personal item was being questioned using institutional rules. This time, Edward did not remain silent. His lawyers responded with a clear document. It was a deed of gift signed by Queen Elizabeth in 1999. It confirmed that the Anthem tiara was a private wedding present. It was not a state loan, not shared property, and not held in trust. It belonged fully to Sophie. A firm stand over the Anthem tiara. Years earlier, in 1999, Edward worked closely with royal jewelers to create a beautiful matching set of black and white pearl jewelry for Sophie. The set included a necklace and a pair of earrings. Each piece was carefully designed to sit perfectly with the Anthem tiara. The materials used for the jewelry were funded through the crown, but Edward kept the design rights. This detail became very important later. His legal team explained that the tiara and the pearl set were not separate items. They formed one complete artistic design connected to Edward's work. Because of this, removing the tiara would break that unity. This argument gave Edward an added layer of legal protection. There was also a strong personal meaning behind the tiara. Sophie wore it on her wedding day, which made it deeply special to her. Then, in October 2019, during a reception at Buckingham Palace marking the work of the Queen Elizabeth Diamond Jubilee Trust, Sophie gave a speech in front of senior royals and guests. During that moment, she turned to Queen Elizabeth II and called her Mama. It was not planned, and it happened in a setting where every word is usually controlled. That single moment showed the closeness between them. The same woman who signed the deed had been like a mother to her. By the afternoon of March 25, 2026, the situation reached a breaking point. Edward's legal team issued a clear warning. If the claim over the tiara was not dropped by the end of the day, they would release private letters written by Elizabeth. These letters clearly stated her wish for Sophie to keep full ownership of her personal jewelry. The letters also contained remarks about Camilla, which made the situation even more sensitive. Releasing those letters would not only support Sophie's position, but also bring past tensions back into public view. It could affect Camilla's reputation, which had taken years to rebuild. What started as a disagreement over a tiara had now become a matter of control, reputation, and legacy. By the evening of that same day, the Anthem tiara remained with Sophie, just as it had been given to her. After the audit and growing legal pressure, Edward took further action. He placed the tiara in a high-security private safe under the control of his own security team. This ensured that no one could take it, review it, or attempt to change its status without a challenge. Defining moment inside Buckingham Palace. By the afternoon of March 25, 2026, The situation had moved beyond office discussions and into a private room inside Buckingham Palace. When Princess Anne entered, the tone changed immediately. There was no attempt to ease into the conversation. She spoke directly and without delay. Her approach reflected the seriousness of the moment and the weight of everything that had led up to it. To fully understand why her presence carried such force, it is important to look at how relationships within the family had changed over the years. Princess Anne and Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh, were not always close. As recently as 2021, Anne kept a clear distance. This was not unusual for her. She has always been known for her honesty and does not show warmth unless it is genuine. If she does not feel a connection, she does not pretend otherwise. Everything began to shift in April 2021 when Prince Philip passed away. His death deeply affected the family and changed its internal structure. During Queen Elizabeth II's final year, both Anne and Sophie stepped forward to support her. This responsibility brought them together often, sometimes every day. Over time, their distance faded, replaced by mutual respect and understanding. By the time of the Queen's funeral in September 2022, the change was clear. As they stood together waiting for the coffin, Sophie gently placed her hand on Anne's back. It was a quiet and simple gesture, yet it showed trust and closeness. That moment reflected a bond that had grown naturally through shared duty and loss. By March 2026, that connection had become strong and protective. When Princess Anne walked into the meeting with King Charles III, she was not there simply as Prince Edward's sister. She was there to defend decisions already made by their mother. She made her position clear from the start. She stated that allowing private gifts from the Queen to be questioned, changed, or taken back would damage the meaning of a monarch's word. Her argument focused on the foundation of royal authority. If a signed document from Queen Elizabeth II could be treated as uncertain, then future decisions would also lose their strength. Trust in a monarch's signature depends on the consistency of every monarch before them. Weakening that trust would affect everything that follows. Anne had already reviewed the documents related to Bagshot Park. She understood the details fully, including what Prince Edward had paid, what agreements were signed, and what the Crown Estate had accepted. The agreement was clear. Edward holds a long-term legal lease on the property, supported by his own financial investment and binding terms. These terms give him the right to live there and manage the property within the limits of the lease. Anne's position was firm. The agreement was valid and complete, with no room for further dispute. She also made it clear that the issues surrounding the tiara and the house were not separate matters. Both involved items personally given by Queen Elizabeth II and supported by signed documents. Both were now being challenged using the same reasoning. Anne pointed out that if one decision could be undone, it would create a path to challenge the other. Once that line was crossed, nothing signed by the Queen would remain secure. There was also a deeply personal side to this situation, especially concerning Sophie. Having lost her own mother at a young age, Sophie had formed a close bond with Queen Elizabeth II over the years. The Queen became a central figure in her life. Anne understood this loss in a personal way, having lost her father in 2021 and her mother in 2022. She knew the importance of the things left behind by those who are gone. For her, this was not just about documents. It was about protecting what remained of those connections. Anne's perspective was also shaped by past experience. She had been close to Princess Diana and had witnessed the gradual weakening of Diana's position within the royal structure. She saw how support was reduced over time and how isolation grew. That memory stayed with her. Now, as she saw pressure building again, even in a different situation, she recognized a similar pattern. This time, she chose not to remain silent. She then made her position even stronger. She warned that if the situation did not stop, she would take action publicly. She stated that she would oversee a full audit of the Queen's household, including expenses, staffing, and allocations connected to Queen Camilla. This was not an empty statement. Anne has a long history of discipline and careful management, and her words carried weight. She also addressed concerns about Prince Edward's children, James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor. There had been quiet pressure to move them into full private status earlier than planned, which would reduce their royal support and protection. Anne stopped this idea immediately. She stated clearly that such a decision belongs to their parents and to the children themselves, not to Queen Camilla. This issue mattered to her on a personal level. Years earlier, Anne had chosen a private path for her own children, Peter and Zara. That choice was hers alone, made freely and without pressure. What she was seeing now was different. It involved influence and force, and she refused to accept it. By the end of the meeting, everything had shifted. King Charles III was left with two difficult choices. He could support Queen Camilla and risk weakening the trust in his own authority, or he could step back and accept that certain boundaries must not be crossed. Neither option offered an easy solution. As Princess Anne left the room, the situation had clearly changed. What had begun as a dispute involving Prince Edward had grown into something much larger. It had become a direct challenge to the authority and direction of the monarchy itself, a line that could not be crossed. After a full review of the complete dossier, the legal team of King Charles III delivered a clear and firm conclusion. Prince Edward's position could not be broken. Every detail was solid. Every document held its strength. There was no royal order that could undo it. The matter was settled in law, and the king had lost that battle. For many years, Charles had believed something that felt natural to him. As king, and as the one who granted the dukedom in April 2023, he believed he still had authority over everything connected to it. This included the title, the property, and the entire structure around it. However, his own legal advisors made it clear in writing that this belief was not correct. What Queen Elizabeth II had given to Edward was not temporary. It was a legal inheritance. It was complete, protected, and beyond his reach. This realization alone was deeply unsettling. Yet, another detail in the file carried even greater weight. There was a letter, formally witnessed by Prince Philip. Charles had always known that his mother supported Edward and Sophie. He understood where her loyalty rested, but he did not know that his father, in the final stage of his life, had also given written support to that protection. This detail changed the entire picture. It showed that the decision was not made by one parent alone. It was a united position. Even after this, the pressure did not ease. Queen Camilla remained firm in her stance. Her focus was clear and consistent. She wanted the same rules applied across the royal family. This included reviewing private gifts such as the tiara, increasing control over properties like Bagshot Park, and ensuring that no one operated outside the system the palace was trying to enforce. Her aim was to bring everything under one central authority. This is where the real difficulty began. Edward and Sophie were already living outside that system. They had a secure home. They had shown that they could manage their responsibilities without full dependence on palace control. This independence made them harder to manage. As a result, every action began to look like an attempt to remove that independence and bring them back under control. Because of this, the atmosphere inside the palace started to change. It became tense and divided. Staff members began to take sides. Those who had worked closely with Sophie for many years quietly showed support for the Edinburgh household. At the same time, dissatisfaction toward the Queen's office began to grow. Where there is division, information begins to spread. Private discussions were no longer fully protected. Internal notes and documents came closer to being exposed than ever before. A system once known for strong control was now facing internal cracks. One insider described the situation in simple terms. The king was being guided into a difficult position. He was being pushed to choose between the wishes of his wife and the final decisions of his mother. No matter what choice he made, the result would cause damage within the family. Outside the palace, the situation was even more sensitive. At a time when many people were facing rising costs and financial pressure, the image of a king trying to take a home from his brother would not be accepted well. This was especially true because that home had been restored using Edward's own effort and resources. Public reaction would likely be strong and unforgiving. Reports suggest that Charles eventually stepped away from the legal route. He wrote a private, handwritten note and sent it directly to Bagshot Park. In it, he asked for a family meeting. This action showed that he understood the law was not in his favor. However, the response he received was firm. Edward refused to meet unless his full legal team was present. That response marked a turning point. This was no longer a simple family discussion. Edward was no longer acting as a younger brother trying to maintain peace. He was acting with full awareness of what was at risk. He chose protection over compromise. Once that line was drawn, it could not be undone. Charles had waited many years to become king. He now led a monarchy that was smaller than before. Yet within that smaller structure, something had clearly shifted. There was now mistrust, division, and ongoing pressure. In Surrey, inside a home he could not legally touch, the final authority over his mother's decisions no longer rested with him. The palace was eventually forced to confirm this outcome in writing. Late on March 25, 2026, an official note was sent from the office of the Master of the Jewel House to Sophie, Duchess of Edinburgh. The message was brief and direct. It stated that the Anthem tiara would remain under her full private control. There was no apology and no explanation. At the same time, the review of Bagshot Park was quietly closed. The official wording recognized the role of the Edinburgh household in maintaining the estate. Within the palace, the meaning was clear. The crown had stepped back. Everything held by Prince Edward was confirmed. The title, the home, and the tiara all remained exactly as Queen Elizabeth II had placed them. This confirmation changed the balance within the family. The issue was no longer a dispute. It became a recorded outcome. The document will remain in the archives for years to come. It will show that a claim was made, it did not succeed, and the institution formally acknowledged it. However, this result did not bring peace. It came with lasting consequences. The relationship between King Charles III and Prince Edward changed completely. It became formal and limited to duty. Public appearances may still show unity, but the deeper truth is different. The family understands what has happened. One brother had to rely on the law to protect himself from the other. That reality does not fade. The structure of the monarchy has also shifted. There are now two clear centers. At Buckingham Palace, the king and queen continue to support a more controlled and streamlined system. Away from that center, another group has quietly formed. Princess Anne, Edward, and Sophie stand together, with support from Prince William and Catherine, Princess of Wales. They are not loud, but they remain firm. They are protecting what was built before and resisting changes to it. This divide is now set. For James, Earl of Wessex, and Lady Louise Windsor, this moment carries lasting meaning. They saw their father act with calm strength. He relied on preparation, documents, and careful control. He stood firm and did not step back. One day, James will carry the Dukedom of Edinburgh, a title once held for many years by his grandfather. But he will carry it with a different understanding. He will know that what is given can also be challenged. This knowledge will shape how he moves within the institution. It will create caution rather than simple trust. As for King Charles, he holds his position, his structure, and his authority. But one thing has changed. He no longer has the full trust of the brother who stood quietly for years, supported himself, and asked only to keep what was given to him. This loss may not appear in official records, but over time, it will become clear. What do you think about the royal family? Share your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. Before you go, be sure to click on the video shown on your screen.